this video, I want to give you a quick example of what a chi-square statistic might look like in a journal article. So this is a table. You'll notice it's looking in comparison of demographic and clinical health characteristics of acute coronary symptom patients. Let's go down to, so these first ones don't fit for chi-squares, and you'll notice in this particular study, it's got the variables down here in this particular, for this study. It's got the total number of subjects, so we got 789, and then it's breaking it down by women and men within the particular study, and then the p-value. So it's not giving us the statistics, the specific statistic from the statistical test. It's just giving us our p-value, right? The probability of whether or not the difference is larger than we expect by chance. And so remember, whenever this p-value is less than 0.05 or less, we say it's statistically significant. And you remember it's giving us this little shorthand within the table too. If we see an asterisk, we can see, okay, it's a statistically significant result. So for these first ones, this wouldn't fit for a chi-square, and it's not that you would know that. You would know that by reading the journal article. This is they would have looked at with just an independent t-test. Same thing for some of these other ones. But here, let's go to marital status to be a little easier to look at. So what are we looking at? Remember, this was women, this is men, and then you have to read down at the bottom. Remember I told you about always look at the footnotes in these tables. And so it says value in parentheses are percentages, and then it gives us our statistical significant information. So remember, this column was for women, this column was for men. And so what we're finding is the percent of women in this study who were single, divorced, separated, or widowed was about 51%. For men, it was only 27%. And you'll notice this is statistically significant, highly significant, right? And we see this. It's a huge difference. The men were much more likely to be married. Men in this study were much more likely to be married compared to women. So it was a big difference within the demographics that they had. Same thing had a significant difference in terms of their living arrangement, if they're living with a spouse or a family member versus living alone. So men were less likely to be living alone as compared to women. For that. Educational level as well, that in this particular sample, the men were more likely to have a college degree and above compared to the women. Women were much more likely to be less than high school education. And let's look at, we can look at one more down here in terms of alcohol use as well, that men were much more likely to be using alcohol as compared to women, and we see that was a large statistically significant difference that we end up seeing there. So one example there of that, and there's multiple different types of chi-square contingency tables that we see here. On this particular one, this is looking at the BDI scores. There's whether or not there's symptoms present. And so this is the percentage that had symptoms present in each of these different areas. And so you'll see for sadness, excuse me, that women, their percentage, they had about 37% who had symptoms related to that as compared to men who only had 21%. And that's a statistically significant difference. This example, though, for pessimism, although women had a larger percentage compared to men, note it was not statistically significant. So that, again, another way in which we could look through the results here and get a basic understanding. Same thing here on this one variable for crying. Women were much more likely to have said that they've cried as compared to men. So again, just quick example of what a chi-square values and proportional values look like in a journal article.